England, 1805. The autumn light filtered through the tall windows of Silverton Manor, casting golden patterns across the Chinese wallpaper of the Dowager's sitting room. Clara Hathaway moved with quiet efficiency as she arranged the tea service, her hands steady despite the weight of circumstances that had brought her to this position. At 24, she had learned that dignity could be maintained even when fortune could not. "A touch more cream, if you please, Clara," came the gentle voice of Adelaide Fairfax, Dowager Duchess of Silverton. At 50, the Dowager remained a formidable presence despite the pallor that had crept into her complexion over recent months. Her silver hair was arranged in an elegant style that had been fashionable in her youth, and her blue eyes, though dimmed by illness, still held remarkable sharpness. "Of course, Your Grace," Clara replied, adding the requested cream to the delicate porcelain cup. The familiar ritual of afternoon tea had become a comfort during her 8 months as the Dowager's companion, a position that represented both salvation and subtle humiliation for the daughter of the late Viscount Hathaway. Adelaide accepted the cup with a nod of thanks, studying Clara with an intensity that made the younger woman wonder, not for the first time, what thoughts moved behind those perceptive eyes. "You have arranged the chrysanthemums beautifully," the Dowager observed, gesturing to the vase Clara had prepared that morning. "They remind me of the gardens at Thornbury, where I spent my girlhood. My mother grew them in every colour imaginable." "They are particularly fine this season," Clara agreed, settling into the chair opposite with her own cup. "Mr. Whitmore, the head gardener, says the weather has been ideal for them." "Mr. Whitmore has been with this family for 40 years, Adelaide said, a faint smile touching her lips. "He taught my son Edmund to climb trees when the boy was barely 6 years old. His late father would have been horrified, of course. The fourth Duke believed in discipline above all else. Sentiment was weakness in his estimation." Clara had heard references to the late Duke before, always delivered in tones that suggested a complicated legacy. She sipped her tea, allowing the Dowager to guide the conversation as she preferred. "I received a letter from Mrs. Dalton this morning," Adelaide continued, setting down her cup. "The school we established in Millbrook Village is thriving. 23 children now attend regularly, learning their letters and sums. She writes that young Thomas Fletcher shows particular promise in mathematics." "That is wonderful news, Your Grace," Clara replied warmly. The charitable works undertaken by the Dowager had been a revelation, a reminder that nobility could mean more than titles and property. "Your efforts have changed those children's futures entirely." Adelaide's expression grew thoughtful. "One does what one can with the resources available. Though I confess, Clara, I worry about the continuation of such projects. My health is not what it was, and my son, though generous, does not share my particular passion for education." The admission hung in the air between them. They had danced around the subject of the Dowager's declining health for weeks, both aware of the shadow lengthening over Silverton Manor, neither willing to speak it aloud until now. "Your Grace," Clara began carefully, but Adelaide raised a hand. "Please, my dear. We have known each other long enough to speak plainly. I am dying, Clara. Not immediately. The physicians assure me I have months yet, perhaps longer if I am careful. But my heart grows weaker with each passing week." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. In 8 months, Adelaide Fairfax had become more than an employer. She had been kind when Clara's fall from grace would have made others cruel, patient when others would have been dismissive, generous when society would have deemed it unwise. "I am so very sorry," Clara managed, her voice thick with genuine emotion. "Do not weep for me," Adelaide said gently. "I have lived a good life, longer than many. But I do worry about Edmund. He will be alone when I'm gone. Truly alone in a way he has not been since his wife died 5 years ago." Clara knew little of the late Duchess beyond whispered comments from the servants. The marriage had been arranged, as most were among their class, and by all accounts it had been dutiful but cold. "He is returning from London this evening," Adelaide continued, her gaze drifting to the window. "He has been away these 3 weeks past, attending to business matters, and he will not be alone." Something in the Dowager's tone made Clara look up sharply. "Lady Camilla Weston will accompany him," Adelaide said. and there was no mistaking the tension that entered her voice. "Daughter of the Marquess of Greymore, you will meet her at dinner tonight." Clara had heard the name whispered among the servants. Lady Camilla Weston, beautiful and accomplished, daughter of one of the most powerful families in England. The woman everyone expected the Duke of Silverton to marry. "I see," Clara said quietly, understanding her place in the hierarchy that would be on display that evening. Adelaide leaned forward, her expression suddenly urgent. "Clara, I must speak to you of a delicate matter, and I must have your complete discretion." "Of course, Your Grace. You have my word." The Dowager paused, as though choosing her words with great care. "I do not trust Lady Camilla Weston. I have watched her these past months, observed how she conducts herself when she believes no one of consequence is paying attention. She is calculating in a way that troubles me deeply." Clara set down her cup, giving the Dowager her full attention. "I have friends in London," Adelaide continued, her voice low. "Women who notice things, who hear whispers in drawing rooms and at card parties. There are rumours, nothing concrete, nothing one could prove in a court of law, but troubling nonetheless. Whispers of debts, of the Marquess's financial difficulties, of Lady Camilla's particular interest in discussing my son's estates and investments." "You believe she seeks to marry the Duke for his fortune," Clara said, understanding dawning. "I believe she seeks to marry him for his title, his properties, his position in society, and yes, his considerable wealth," Adelaide replied. "What I do not believe is that she has any genuine affection for my son, or any intention of making him happy. And Edmund, bless him, is too honourable to see it. He believes duty and compatibility are sufficient foundations for marriage. He does not understand that he deserves more." Clara felt the weight of what the Dowager was sharing. "Why are you telling me this, Your Grace?" Adelaide reached across and took Clara's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Because I am asking for your help, my dear. I need you to observe Lady Camilla when she visits. Watch how she conducts herself, how she speaks of Edmund when she believes no one is truly listening. You move through this house almost invisible to someone of her station, which makes you perfectly positioned to see the truth." "Your Grace, I am hardly qualified to judge such matters," Clara protested. "And if Lady Camilla were to discover I was reporting her behaviour to you, the scandal would be considerable." "Which is why you must be discreet," Adelaide pressed. "Clara, you are intelligent and observant. More than that, you understand what it means to endure hardship with grace. Your father's death left you nearly destitute, forced you into service when you should have been making your own advantageous match. Yet you have maintained your dignity, your kindness, your integrity. Those qualities are rare, my dear, far rarer than beauty or accomplishment." Clara felt her cheeks warm at the praise. Her father, the Viscount Hathaway, had died 2 years ago, leaving behind a mountain of debts that had shocked his family. The London townhouse had been sold, the country estate leased to strangers, and Clara had been left with nothing but the clothes on her back and the dubious charity of distant relations. Her aunt, Mrs. Lavinia Pembroke, had offered her a position as a governess in Bath, but Clara had chosen instead to remain closer to what had once been her world, taking the position as the Dowager's companion. "I do not ask this lightly," Adelaide continued, "but time is not on my side, Clara. If Edmund is to avoid making a terrible mistake, if he is to have any chance at genuine happiness, then the truth about Lady Camilla must come to light. Will you help me?" Clara looked into the Dowager's earnest face and felt the weight of the request settle on her shoulders. It was improper, possibly even dangerous, to spy on a Marquess's daughter. Yet she owed Adelaide Fairfax everything, her current position, her restored dignity, her very survival. "I will help you, Your Grace," Clara said quietly, "though I pray we are both wrong about Lady Camilla's character." Adelaide squeezed her hand once more before releasing it. "As do I, my dear, as do I." They spoke of lighter matters for the remainder of the afternoon, discussing the upcoming harvest festival in the village and the progress on Clara's embroidery sampler. But the weight of their earlier conversation lingered, a shadow over the pleasant ritual of tea and conversation. As the autumn sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the manicured grounds of Silverton Manor, Clara excused herself to prepare for dinner. In her small but comfortable chamber in the east wing, she changed from her day dress into her evening attire, a gown of deep blue silk that had been altered from one of her mother's. It was modest but well made, appropriate for a lady's companion dining with the family. Her reflection in the mirror showed a woman neither beautiful nor plain, with honey blonde hair arranged simply and green eyes that held more wisdom than her 24 years might suggest. She had been told once that she possessed a quiet elegance, a compliment that had seemed more polite than sincere at the time. Now, knowing she would be in the presence of the celebrated Lady Camilla Weston, Clara found herself wishing for the first time in months that fortune had not robbed her of the gowns and jewels that might have made her feel less invisible. Foolish vanity, she chided herself aloud, turning from the mirror. She was a companion, not a guest, and certainly not a rival for anyone's attention. The sound of carriage wheels on gravel drew her to the window. A magnificent travelling coach emblazoned with the Silverton crest had pulled up before the main entrance, its matched greys stamping and snorting after their journey from London. Clara watched as a footman opened the door and a tall figure emerged. Even from this distance, Edmund Fairfax, Duke of Silverton, commanded attention. At 32, he retained the athletic build of a man who managed his estates personally rather than through intermediaries. His dark hair was cut fashionably short, and though Clara could not see his face clearly from this angle, she knew from his portrait in the gallery that he possessed strong, regular features and eyes of an intense blue. A second figure emerged from the coach, and Clara felt her breath catch. Lady Camilla Weston was everything the gossips had promised and more. Tall and statuesque, with raven black hair and a figure that even the most modest travelling dress could not disguise, she moved with the confidence of a woman who had never questioned her place in the world. Even her descent from the coach seemed choreographed for maximum effect. A third passenger emerged, an older gentleman whom Clara recognised as the Marquis of Greymore himself. His presence suggested this was no casual visit. Clara stepped back from the window, her heart beating faster. The dowager's words echoed in her mind. Marry him before she does. It had been a whisper, urgent and desperate, a plea from a dying woman who feared for her son's future. And Clara, who had nothing to offer but her discretion and her loyalty, had agreed to help. As the dinner bell rang through the corridors of Silverton Manor, Clara made her way to the dining room, wondering what this evening would reveal and whether she had the courage to do what the dowager had asked. 2 weeks followed the Duke's return to Silverton Manor, and in that time, the household settled into a rhythm that felt both familiar and strangely charged with unspoken tension. Clara's days began as they always had, attending to the dowager in the mornings, reading correspondence aloud, and discussing the various charitable endeavours that Adelaide oversaw with such dedication. But now there was an added dimension to her duties, a watchfulness that made her acutely aware of every visitor, every conversation, every subtle shift in the atmosphere of the great house. Lady Camilla Weston had not taken up residence at Silverton. Propriety forbade such an arrangement before a formal betrothal, but she visited with alarming frequency. Her carriage could be seen in the drive nearly every afternoon, and she moved through the manor's public rooms with the easy confidence of a woman who already considered herself its future mistress. Clara's first extended observation of Lady Camilla came on a crisp October morning when she accompanied the dowager on her daily walk through the formal gardens. Adelaide had been having what she called a good day, her breathing less laboured than usual, her colour improved, and she had insisted on taking some exercise despite the autumn chill. They were admiring the late blooming roses when the sound of voices carried across the manicured lawns. Clara turned to see the Duke approaching with Lady Camilla on his arm, both dressed for riding. Edmund wore a dark coat that emphasised his broad shoulders, while Camilla was resplendent in a crimson habit that must have cost more than Clara earned in a year. "Mother," Edmund called, genuine warmth entering his usually reserved expression as he caught sight of the dowager. "You should not be out in this cold air without a proper shawl." "Nonsense," Adelaide replied, though Clara noticed how she leaned more heavily on her walking stick than she had moments before. "A little fresh air never harmed anyone. Good morning, Lady Camilla." "Your Grace," Camilla acknowledged with a curtsy that managed to be technically correct, while somehow conveying that she considered the dowager's title merely borrowed, soon to be her own. What a charming picture you make, communing with nature. Though I must agree with Edmund, the air does seem rather sharp today. Clara has been reading to me about the new irrigation system proposed for the South Fields, Adelaide said, either missing or deliberately ignoring the condescension in Camilla's tone. The tenants believe it could increase crop yields by 1/3. How industrious, Camilla murmured, her gaze sliding over Clara with the same attention one might give a piece of furniture. Though surely such tedious matters need not concern you, Your Grace. You should be resting, preserving your strength. Edmund frowned slightly. My mother has always taken an active interest in the estate's management. Her insights have proven invaluable over the years. Of course, Camilla amended smoothly. I meant no disrespect. I simply worry for her health. When we are married, Edmund, I shall ensure your dear mother wants for nothing in her retirement. The presumption in those words made Clara's hands tighten on the book she carried. The dowager's expression remained serene, but Clara caught the brief flicker of distress in her eyes. The irrigation system is a sound investment, Clara found herself saying, surprising even herself with the interruption. The Viscount Hathaway implemented a similar design on his Kentish properties 10 years ago. It paid for itself within 3 harvests. All eyes turned to her. Edmund's gaze held unexpected interest, while Camilla's held something far less pleasant. How fascinating that you should have an opinion on agricultural matters, Camilla said, her smile not reaching her eyes. Though I suppose one learns all manner of unusual things in your position. Clara's father was an excellent steward of his lands, Adelaide interjected firmly. She often accompanied him on his rounds of inspection. Her practical knowledge is considerable. Indeed, Edmund said, and Clara felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing. Miss Hathaway, I should very much like to hear more about this irrigation design. Perhaps you might join me for a tour of the South Fields tomorrow. I would value your perspective. The invitation hung in the air, unexpected and oddly intimate, despite its practical nature. Clara felt her cheeks warm under the intensity of his gaze. I would be honoured, Your Grace, she managed, if the dowager can spare me. Of course, Adelaide said, a note of satisfaction in her voice that Clara suspected only she could detect. The fresh air will do you good, my dear. Camilla's expression had frozen into something that resembled a smile, only in the most technical sense. How kind of you to take an interest in the servant's education, Edmund, though surely your steward would be better equipped to discuss such technical matters. Miss Hathaway is not a servant, Edmund corrected, his tone cooling perceptibly. She is my mother's companion and a gentleman's daughter. The distinction is significant. The rebuke, gentle as it was, brought a flush to Camilla's cheeks. She recovered quickly, laughing as though Edmund had made a clever joke. But of course, forgive my poor choice of words. Now, shall we continue our ride? The horses grow restless. As they departed, Camilla's hand possessive on Edmund's arm, Clara caught the calculating look the other woman threw back over her shoulder. It was a look that promised trouble, a warning that Clara's momentary visibility had been noted and would not be forgiven. Well, Adelaide murmured once they were out of earshot. That was illuminating. I apologize if I overstepped, Your Grace, Clara said quietly. I should not have spoken. Nonsense. You demonstrated exactly what I suspected, that Lady Camilla views any woman, regardless of station, as a potential rival. Even you, my dear, whom she should consider beneath her notice. Adelaide's expression was grim. That is not the behaviour of a woman secure in her affections. That is the behaviour of a woman guarding an investment. The following morning dawned clear and bright, the autumn sun burning away the mist that clung to Silverton's valleys. Clara dressed in her most practical walking dress, a serviceable brown wool that had seen her through many country rambles in her former life. Edmund was waiting at the stables when she arrived, his own attire far less formal than the elegant coats he wore for dinner. In boots and a plain coat, he looked younger, more approachable, and Clara felt an unexpected flutter of nervousness as he smiled in greeting. Miss Hathaway, punctual as ever. Shall we walk? The fields are not far. They set out across the estate, following paths that wound through woodlands just beginning to turn gold and crimson. Edmund proved to be an engaging companion, asking intelligent questions about her father's agricultural methods and listening carefully to her responses. "You miss him," he observed as they paused at a gate overlooking the south fields. "Your father, I mean. It is evident in the way you speak of his work." Clara nodded, surprised by the tightness in her throat. "Every day. He was not perfect. His financial management left much to be desired, but he cared deeply for his tenants and his land. He taught me that privilege carries responsibility, not just entitlement. A lesson some never learn," Edmund said quietly, his gaze distant. "My own father believed that tenants existed to serve our interests, not the other way around. He would have been horrified to see me consulting with a steward, let alone implementing improvements suggested by the workers themselves." "But you do consult them," Clara said. "I do, much to the disapproval of certain members of my class." A wry smile touched his lips. "I have been called eccentric, overly familiar with my inferiors, insufficiently mindful of the natural order, but I have also seen crop yields increase, tenant satisfaction improve, and fewer families seeking charity because they cannot feed themselves. I will take eccentricity over willful blindness any day." Clara found herself warming to him in a way she had not anticipated. The Duke of Silverton was not the cold, duty-bound aristocrat she had imagined from their brief encounters at dinner. There was genuine thoughtfulness here, a man who took his responsibilities seriously. They spent an hour discussing the proposed irrigation system, walking the length of the fields and examining the terrain. Edmund took notes in a small leather book, asking her opinion on water sources and distribution channels. It was only when the church bells in the distant village struck noon that they realized how much time had passed. "I have kept you too long," Edmund said, sounding genuinely regretful. "My mother will wonder what has become of you." "The Dowager encouraged this excursion," Clara reminded him. "She values improvements to the estate as much as you do." "My mother is a remarkable woman," Edmund said softly. "I fear I have not always appreciated her wisdom as I should have. She tried to tell me once that my first marriage was ill-advised, but I would not listen. I believed duty was sufficient foundation for happiness." The admission surprised Clara with its intimacy. "You were very young when you married," she ventured carefully, remembering that his late wife had died 5 years ago, making him only 27 at the time of her death. 22, and convinced I knew everything." Edmund's expression grew distant. "Caroline was beautiful and accomplished, everything a duchess should be on paper. But we barely knew each other, had no shared interests, no genuine affection beyond what duty required. She died giving birth to a stillborn son, and I could not even claim we had been happy in the time we had together." "I'm sorry," Clara said quietly, "for your loss, and for the loneliness of it." Edmund looked at her then, really looked at her, and something shifted in the air between them. "You understand," he said, wonder in his voice. "Most people offer platitudes about tragic loss and cut short lives. You understand the more painful truth." Before Clara could respond, a voice called across the fields, "Edmund, there you are." Lady Camilla Weston appeared on the path behind them, her morning dress of pale yellow silk entirely unsuitable for country walking. Her expression was bright and cheerful, but Clara caught the flash of something darker in her eyes as she took in the intimate nature of their conversation. "I called at the house, and Mrs. Henshaw said you were inspecting the fields," Camilla continued, slightly breathless. "I thought I might join you, though I see your companion has already claimed that pleasure. Miss Hathaway has been providing valuable insight into agricultural improvements," Edmund said evenly. "We have had a most productive morning." "How industrious," Camilla replied, the same word she had used days before, laden with subtle contempt. "Though surely you have exhausted the topic by now. I thought we might ride to the village, Edmund. There is a sweet little church I wish to see, so charming and rustic." Edmund glanced at Clara, and she saw the flicker of reluctance in his expression before duty reasserted itself. "Of course. Miss Hathaway, thank you for your time. I will have my steward draw up plans based on our discussion." As they walked back toward the manor, Camilla positioned herself between Clara and Edmund, her chatter filling the air with commentary about fashion and London gossip. Clara found herself relegated to walking slightly behind, invisible once more. But when they reached the house and parted ways, Edmund turned back. "Miss Hathaway, I wonder if you might join me in the library this evening. My mother mentioned you have an appreciation for poetry, and I recently acquired a new collection from London. I should value your opinion." The invitation, delivered in front of Camilla, was clearly deliberate. Camilla's smile became fixed, brittle. "How thoughtful," she managed. "Though I fear poetry might be rather dull for you, Edmund. Perhaps we might play cards instead. I could invite several friends to make an evening of it." "Another time, perhaps," Edmund replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I find I'm in the mood for quieter pursuits. Until this evening, Miss Hathaway." As Clara curtsied and retreated into the house, she felt Camilla's gaze boring into her back like a physical weight. The days that followed established a pattern that felt increasingly dangerous. Edmund sought Clara's company with growing frequency, consulting her on estate matters, discussing books in the library after dinner, walking the grounds when the weather permitted. The Dowager encouraged these encounters, always ensuring they were properly chaperoned, but creating opportunities nonetheless. Camilla's visits intensified in response. She arrived earlier and stayed later, her possessiveness over Edmund growing more obvious by the day. During afternoon tea in the Dowager's sitting room, Clara witnessed the full force of Camilla's calculating nature. "I have been thinking about the Christmas festivities," Camilla announced, pouring tea with the ease of a woman already mistress of the house. "Silverton should host a grand ball this year, something to establish our position in society once the betrothal is formalized." "Our position," Adelaide repeated quietly. "Edmund's and mine, naturally," Camilla continued smoothly. "I have already begun planning the guest list. We shall invite only the most influential families, those whose connections will be valuable. The Dowager Viscountess, for instance. Her husband sits in the Lords and could be useful for Edmund's political ambitions." "I was not aware Edmund had political ambitions," Adelaide said. Camilla waved a dismissive hand. "All men of his station should. With proper guidance, he could wield considerable influence. And of course certain traditions at Silverton could be updated. This charity work, while admirable in sentiment, projects an image of weakness. Better to donate funds to established institutions than maintain these personal projects." Clara felt her hands tighten around her teacup. These personal projects were Adelaide's life's work. Schools and programs built over decades. The schools provide education to children who would otherwise have none, Adelaide said, her voice remarkably steady. "The Women's Employment Program has helped dozens of families become self-sufficient. These are not weaknesses, Lady Camilla. They are legacies." Of course," Camilla soothed, though her eyes remained cold. "I meant no offence. It is simply that a duchess must consider her image. One can be charitable without being quite so involved in the actual mechanisms of charity." "I see," Adelaide replied, and Clara heard the wealth of understanding in those two words. This was not a difference of opinion. This was a fundamental incompatibility of values. That evening, as Clara read to the Dowager before bed, Adelaide's breathing grew laboured. She suffered what she called a spell, her hand pressed to her chest, her face draining of colour. Clara called for the physician immediately, sitting with the Dowager through the long hours until the doctor arrived and administered laudanum for the pain. "It is as I feared," Dr. Pemberton told Clara in the hallway, his voice low. "The Dowager's heart weakens daily. She must avoid excitement and distress. Any strong emotion could prove dangerous." Clara thought of Camilla's comments that afternoon, of the casual dismissal of everything Adelaide held dear, and felt a surge of protective anger. The next morning, Edmund sought Clara out in the morning room, where she was reviewing the household accounts with Mrs. Henshaw, the head housekeeper. "Miss Hathaway, might I speak with you privately?" Mrs. Henshaw excused herself with a knowing look that made Clara's cheeks warm. When they were alone, Edmund's expression was troubled. "My mother tells me you sat with her all night during her spell. Dr. Pemberton said you quite possibly saved her life by acting so quickly. Anyone would have done the same, Your Grace. Please, When we are alone, call me Edmund. We have moved beyond such formality, have we not? The intimacy of the request made Clara's breath catch. That would be highly improper. Perhaps, but I find I value honesty over propriety where you are concerned. He moved closer, close enough that she could smell the sandalwood soap he used. See the fine lines at the corners of his blue eyes. You care for her genuinely, not because it is your duty, but because you have a generous heart. That quality is rare in my world, Miss Hathaway. Most people want something from me, my title, my wealth, my influence. You want nothing except to serve my mother well. It is refreshing, beyond measure. Clara should have stepped back, should have maintained the proper distance between their stations. Instead, she found herself saying, "Your mother is worried about you. I know. She does not approve of my understanding with Lady Camilla. Can you blame her?" The words escaped before Clara could stop them. Edmund's eyebrows rose. "You too? I thought you more circumspect. Forgive me, I should not have spoken." Clara turned toward the door, but Edmund caught her hand. "No, please. Tell me what you see. My mother claims you are observant. I would know your honest assessment." Clara met his gaze, seeing genuine curiosity there, perhaps even hope that someone might confirm the doubts he himself harboured. Lady Camilla is accomplished and beautiful. She would make a suitable duchess by any conventional measure. But I wonder if she loves Silverton, or only what Silverton represents. Edmund released her hand slowly, his expression unreadable. "You think she is mercenary." "I think she is practical," Clara corrected carefully. "As many in our world must be. But I wonder if practicality alone can sustain a marriage, especially when you have already experienced one such arrangement." The silence stretched between them, charged with unspoken understanding. Finally, Edmund nodded. "Thank you for your honesty. I shall consider what you have said." Later that afternoon, Mrs. Henshaw sought Clara out in the still room, where she was helping prepare medicines for the Dowager. "Miss Hathaway, forgive my boldness, but I must speak." The housekeeper's normally stern expression held something almost maternal. "I have served this family for 30 years, and I have never seen His Grace as at ease as when he is in your company. He smiles more, laughs more, seems more himself than he has in all the years since his poor wife died. Mrs. Henshaw, I am simply the Dowager's companion. You are a gentleman's daughter fallen on hard times, and he is a duke who values substance over superficial brilliance. I am not blind, my dear, and neither is Lady Camilla Weston. She watches you like a hawk watches a rabbit. You must be careful." The warning proved prescient. That very evening, as Clara made her way to the library for the reading Edmund had suggested, she overheard voices in the corridor. Camilla and Edmund engaged in what sounded like a heated discussion. "I do not understand this fascination with Miss Hathaway's opinions," Camilla was saying, her voice sharp despite the obvious effort to control it. "She is your mother's paid companion, Edmund. Surely her views on estate management are irrelevant. I find them quite relevant, actually. And I would thank you not to disparage Miss Hathaway in my hearing." "Disparage? I simply observe that your attention to her is inappropriate and likely to cause talk. People will wonder at your interest in someone so far beneath your station." "My station? Or yours?" Edmund's voice held an edge Clara had never heard before. "I begin to think you are overly concerned with stations and appearances, Camilla." A pause. Then Camilla's voice, softer now, calculated in its sweetness. "Forgive me, dearest. I only worry for your reputation. Surely you can understand my concern. When we are wed, such friendships will need to be managed more carefully. A duchess must be above reproach, and her husband equally so." "When we are wed," Edmund repeated slowly. "Camilla, we have discussed a possible future together, but I have made no formal proposal. Perhaps we should clarify our understanding." Clara fled before she could hear more, her heart pounding. She did not go to the library that evening, sending word through a maid that she was unwell. The following morning brought an announcement that changed everything. Edmund gathered the household and formally declared that an engagement ball would be held in 1 week's time, where his betrothal to Lady Camilla Weston would be officially celebrated before all of society. Clara received the news in the Dowager's sitting room, watching Adelaide's face crumble before the older woman composed herself with visible effort. "So it is decided then," Adelaide whispered when they were alone. "Perhaps it is for the best," Clara said, though the words tasted like ash. "He must marry someone, and Lady Camilla's family is very powerful." "She will make him miserable," Adelaide said flatly, "and she will undo everything I have worked for. But I am dying, Clara, and I will not be here to protect him from his own sense of duty." That night, unable to sleep, Clara stood at her window watching the stars wheel overhead. Somewhere in this great house, Edmund Fairfax was likely awake as well, bound by honour to a woman who saw him as a prize to be won rather than a man to be loved. And in 1 week, at a grand ball that would seal his fate, Clara would be expected to smile and offer congratulations, while her heart broke for reasons she could not fully name and dared not examine too closely. The die, it seemed, was cast. All that remained was to see how it would fall. The week preceding the engagement ball transformed Silverton Manor into a hive of activity. Servants hurried through corridors carrying armfuls of hothouse flowers. Footmen polished silver until it gleamed like mirrors. And the ballroom that had stood closed and silent for years was opened and aired, its chandeliers cleaned until each crystal prism caught and refracted the autumn light. Clara watched the preparations with a heavy heart, maintaining her duties to the Dowager, while the house prepared to celebrate Edmund's commitment to a woman neither of them trusted. Adelaide's health had declined noticeably since the announcement, her breath growing shorter, her colour more ashen. But she refused to take to her bed. "I will attend this ball," she told Clara with quiet determination. "I will not give Camilla the satisfaction of my absence, nor will I abandon my son at such a moment, even if he is too blind to see what he is doing." It was on the 3rd day of preparations that the first poisonous whisper reached Clara's ears. She had been consulting with Mrs. Henshaw about the Dowager's dietary requirements when one of the younger maids, a girl named Betsy, entered the kitchen with gossip practically bursting from her lips. "Have you heard?" Betsy stage whispered to the cook, not noticing Clara standing in the doorway of the still room. Lady Camilla told her maid, and her maid told everyone, that Miss Hathaway has been setting her cap at the Duke something fierce. Says she has been throwing herself at him every chance she gets, using the Dowager's illness to get close to him. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. Mrs. Henshaw's expression turned thunderous. "That is quite enough, Betsy," the housekeeper snapped. "I will not have such wicked gossip repeated in my kitchen. Miss Hathaway is a lady and has conducted herself with nothing but propriety since arriving at Silverton." "But Lady Camilla said—" "I do not care what Lady Camilla said. She is not mistress of this house yet, and while I am housekeeper here, I will not tolerate such slander of a good woman." Mrs. Henshaw's voice could have cut glass. "Now get back to your duties before I dismiss you without a character reference." Betsy scurried away, properly chastened, but the damage was done. Clara stood frozen in the still-room doorway, understanding with perfect clarity what Camilla had done. Unable to directly attack Clara's position or behaviour, she had instead planted seeds of doubt. Let insinuation do the work that accusation could not. "Do not let it trouble you, Miss Hathaway," Mrs. Henshaw said quietly, moving to stand beside Clara. "Those of us who know you understand the truth, but His Grace does not know me." "Not really," Clara replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "And he will hear these rumours. How can he not?" She was proven correct that very afternoon. Edmund sent word requesting Clara's presence in his study, and the formality of the summons made her stomach clench with dread. He stood with his back to the door when she entered, staring out the window at the grounds he loved so well. His shoulders were rigid, his posture speaking of barely controlled anger. "Your Grace." "You wish to see me," Clara said, maintaining as much composure as she could muster. Edmund turned slowly, and the coldness in his blue eyes was like a physical blow. "I have been made aware of certain rumours circulating among the staff, rumours concerning your conduct and your motivations for remaining at Silverton." "I see," Clara managed, though her throat felt tight. "Do you deny that you have sought my company on numerous occasions? That you have encouraged private conversations, solicited my attention through discussions of estate matters, and shared literary interests. The injustice of it stole Clara's breath. You invited those conversations, Your Grace. You sought my opinion on the irrigation system. You requested I join you in the library. I have never presumed— Have you not? Edmund interrupted, his voice sharp. I have been a fool, Miss Hathaway. I thought we had developed a friendship based on mutual respect and genuine connection. Now I wonder if I have been the object of a calculated campaign, encouraged by my own mother, who wishes to see me make a match more to her liking. Your mother has nothing to do with this, Clara protested, fighting to keep her voice steady. She has never suggested— Do not lie to me. Edmund's composure cracked slightly, revealing hurt beneath the anger. I know my mother disapproves of Camilla. I know she would prefer I choose differently. And you, with your quiet dignity and your sympathetic ear, make a very convenient alternative, do you not? Especially for a woman who has nothing to her name but debts and depends entirely on my family's charity for her survival. The cruelty of the words, made worse by containing a grain of truth, brought tears to Clara's eyes despite her best efforts. You believe I have been trying to seduce you for your fortune, that I am so mercenary. I do not know what to believe any more, Edmund said, turning away again. I only know that I have been indiscreet, and that indiscretion has led to gossip that could damage both our reputations. It must stop, Miss Hathaway. I will continue to provide for my mother's comfort, and ensure you have a position here as long as she lives. But our private conversations are at an end. Is that understood? Clara wanted to defend herself, wanted to explain about Adelaide's concerns and the observations she had been asked to make. But to do so would be to betray the Dowager's confidence, and worse, it would sound exactly like the calculated scheme Edmund already believed it to be. Perfectly understood, Your Grace, she said, her voice hollow. Will that be all? Yes, you may go. Clara walked from the study with her head high, but the moment she reached her chamber, she collapsed into a chair, shaking with suppressed emotion. The injustice of it burned. She had done nothing wrong, nothing improper, yet Camilla had successfully poisoned Edmund's mind against her with nothing more than strategic whispers. A knock at her door revealed Mrs. Henshaw, her expression sympathetic. I heard what happened. The whole staff knows he called you to his study. I am sorry, my dear. It does not matter, Clara said dully. He has made his choice, and it is not my place to question it. It matters more than you know, Mrs. Henshaw replied. I have never seen His Grace as happy as he has been these past weeks when he was with you. Lady Camilla has stolen that from him, from both of you, with her poisoned tongue. But there was nothing to be done. The engagement ball loomed 3 days away now, and Clara could only watch as preparations continued and Camilla's triumph drew nearer. The night of the ball arrived cold and clear, with stars brilliant in the October sky. Clara dressed with care in a gown of deep blue silk that had belonged to her mother, altered to fit her slighter frame. It was elegant, but understated, appropriate for a companion attending her employer, rather than a guest celebrating in her own right. She helped Adelaide dress as well, the Dowager insisting on wearing her finest jewels despite her obvious fatigue. I will not be overshadowed in my own home, Adelaide said with a flash of her old spirit. If this is to be my son's engagement ball, I will at least remind him of what he is losing. The ballroom blazed with light when they descended, every chandelier lit, every surface gleaming. The cream of society had gathered, drawn by the prospect of witnessing the Duke of Silverton's formal betrothal to the daughter of one of England's most powerful marquises. The air hummed with conversation and anticipation. Edmund stood near the centre of the room with Camilla on his arm. She was magnificent in crimson silk, diamonds at her throat and in her dark hair. Every inch the Duchess she aspired to become. Edmund looked handsome in his formal black coat, but Clara noticed the tension in his jaw, the lack of genuine warmth in his smile. Their eyes met briefly across the crowded room, and Clara saw something flicker in his expression before he deliberately looked away. Come, my dear, Adelaide murmured, guiding Clara to a less conspicuous position near the wall. We shall observe from here. The evening progressed with agonizing slowness. Clara watched Edmund and Camilla dance, watched as toast after toast was offered, watched as Camilla accepted congratulations with gracious smiles that never quite reached her eyes. It was at precisely 10:30 that the formal announcement was to be made. The orchestra fell silent, and Edmund stepped forward with Camilla beside him. The assembled guests quieted, all attention focused on the couple at the centre of the ballroom. "My lords, ladies, and honoured guests," Edmund began, his voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "Thank you for joining us on this significant occasion. It is with great pleasure that I announce my engagement to Lady Camilla Weston, daughter of the Marquis of Greymore. We shall be married in the spring, and I hope you will all join us in celebrating." A cry cut through his words, sharp and full of distress. Clara turned to see Adelaide swaying, her hand pressed to her chest, her face suddenly grey with pain. "Mother!" Edmund's voice cracked with fear as he abandoned Camilla and rushed to Adelaide's side. Clara was there almost as quickly, catching the Dowager as her knees buckled. "Help me get her to a chair," Edmund commanded, and together they supported Adelaide to a seat at the edge of the ballroom. The guests murmured and pressed closer, curiosity overcoming propriety. "Give her air," Mrs. Henshaw ordered, materializing from somewhere in the crowd to push back the onlookers. "Someone fetch Dr. Pemberton immediately." Adelaide's breathing was laboured, each inhalation seeming to cost her tremendous effort. Her lips had taken on a bluish tinge that terrified Clara. "Edmund!" Adelaide gasped, clutching her son's hand. "Edmund! Listen to me. Save your strength, mother. The doctor will be here soon." "No," Adelaide insisted, her grip surprisingly strong. "Must tell you. About Camilla. About Clara. Must listen." "This is hardly the time," Camilla began, but Edmund silenced her with a look. "What about them, mother?" he asked gently. "Wrong choice," Adelaide managed. "You are making the wrong choice. Camilla wants your title, your wealth. Clara wants nothing. Can you not see the difference?" "Mother, you are overwrought." "I am dying." Adelaide's voice gained strength from desperation. "And I will not leave this world without speaking truth. I asked Clara to observe Lady Camilla because I suspected her motives. Everything I feared has proven true. She is calculating, mercenary, interested only in what you represent, not who you are." The ballroom had gone utterly silent. Every eye was fixed on the unfolding drama. The Dowager Duchess publicly challenging her son's choice of bride. Camilla's face had gone pale, then flushed with anger. "Your Grace, this is inappropriate. You are clearly unwell and not in possession of your full faculties." "My faculties are perfectly intact," Adelaide snapped, some of her old fire returning. "I see very clearly what you are, Lady Camilla. I only pray my son does before it is too late." Dr. Pemberton arrived then, pushing through the crowd with his medical bag. "Everyone must leave. The Dowager needs quiet and rest." Edmund looked torn between his duty to his guests and his concern for his mother. Camilla made the decision for him, her voice ringing out clear and commanding. "Please, everyone, do not let this unfortunate incident spoil your evening. The Dowager will receive the best of care, I am certain. Let us adjourn to the supper room while His Grace attends to his mother." It was smoothly done, redirecting attention and asserting control. Most of the guests allowed themselves to be herded toward refreshments, though the whispers would fuel gossip for weeks to come. Edmund lifted Adelaide carefully, carrying her from the ballroom, with Clara following close behind. They took her to her chambers, where Dr. Pemberton conducted his examination with grim efficiency. When he finally emerged to speak with Edmund in the hallway, his expression was grave. "I am afraid the Dowager's heart is failing rapidly. This attack has weakened her severely. It is only a matter of time now, perhaps days, perhaps only hours. You should prepare yourself, Your Grace." Edmund's face crumbled for just a moment before he regained control. "May I sit with her?" "Of course. Miss Hathaway, you should rest. You look exhausted." "I will stay," Clara said firmly. "The Dowager would want me here." They kept vigil through that long night, Edmund on one side of Adelaide's bed and Clara on the other. The Dowager drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes lucid, sometimes confused. During one of her clear moments, she called Edmund closer. "Promise me," she whispered. "Promise me you will think carefully about what I said. About Camilla and Clara. Promise me you will not marry out of duty alone. Mother, please rest. Promise me, Edmund." "I promise," he said finally, though Clara heard the conflict in his voice. "I will consider carefully before taking any irrevocable step." Adelaide seemed satisfied with that. She reached out with her other hand, grasping Clara's. "Thank you, my dear, for everything. You have been more than a companion. You have been a true friend. The honour has been mine, Your Grace." Clara managed through her tears. Adelaide smiled faintly. "Take care of him when I am gone. He will need someone to remind him that there is more to life than duty and obligation." As dawn broke over Silverton Manor, Adelaide Fairfax drew her last breath. She went peacefully, slipping away so quietly that for a moment neither Edmund nor Clara realised she had left them. When they did, Edmund's control finally shattered. He wept openly, and Clara, forgetting propriety, put her arms around him in comfort. For just a moment, he leaned into her embrace, accepting the solace she offered. Then he straightened, wiping his eyes, the Duke once more. "Thank you, Miss Hathaway," he said formally, "for your care of my mother. She was fortunate to have you." "I was fortunate to know her," Clara replied. They stood on opposite sides of Adelaide's bed, with her body between them, and Clara felt the distance that had reopened between them like a physical wound. The funeral 2 days later was a grand affair befitting a Dowager Duchess. The church in the village overflowed with mourners, and the procession to the family crypt was witnessed by hundreds. Through it all, Camilla played her part to perfection, the devoted future daughter-in-law, graciously accepting condolences and managing the social intricacies with flawless poise. Clara watched from the back of the church, anonymous among the household servants and lesser attendees. She saw Edmund, face set in stone as he endured an endless stream of sympathies. She saw Camilla, hand possessive on his arm, already acting as his duchess in all but name, and she understood with painful clarity that Adelaide's dying plea had changed nothing. The betrothal had been announced publicly before the entire ton. Edmund was bound by honour, by duty, by the expectations of their world. He would marry Camilla Weston as planned, and Clara would remain exactly what she had always been: invisible, irrelevant, beneath notice. That night, alone in her chamber, Clara made a decision. She could not remain at Silverton and watch Edmund marry a woman who would make him miserable. She could not continue in a house that would forever remind her of Adelaide's kindness and unfulfilled hopes. She would write to her Aunt Lavinia in Bath and accept that long-standing offer of a position as governess. It was time to leave Silverton Manor and everything it represented behind. Time to accept that some battles were lost before they ever truly began. 3 weeks passed following Adelaide Fairfax's burial in the family crypt, and Silverton Manor seemed to settle into a strange, hollow quiet. The servants moved through their duties with subdued efficiency. The autumn gardens began their inevitable decline toward winter, and Edmund Fairfax withdrew into his grief with a silence that troubled everyone who knew him. Clara remained at her post, though the purpose that had sustained her presence had been laid to rest alongside the Dowager. She continued to oversee the charitable programs Adelaide had established, corresponding with the village school and the Women's Employment Initiative, determined that her benefactor's legacy would not be abandoned in the confusion of mourning. It was during one such morning of correspondence that Mrs. Henshaw appeared at the door of the small office Clara had claimed as her own, her expression deeply troubled. "Miss Hathaway, forgive the interruption, but I must speak with you about a matter of some delicacy." Clara set down her pen. "Of course, Mrs. Henshaw. Please, sit." The housekeeper remained standing, her hands clasped tightly before her. "It concerns Lady Camilla Weston and certain liberties she has been taking with the household." A knot formed in Clara's stomach. "What sort of liberties?" "She has been issuing orders to the staff as though she were already mistress here, Mrs." Henshaw said, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Yesterday, she dismissed 2 maids without consulting His Grace, claiming their work was unsatisfactory. This morning, she instructed the footman to remove the dowager's portrait from the main hall and replace it with a landscape she brought from her father's house. Clara felt a surge of outrage. The dowager's portrait? But that was painted only 5 years ago. It has always hung in the place of honor. I am aware. I refused to allow the change, naturally, but Lady Camilla became quite insistent. She claimed that a house in mourning should not display reminders of death, that it was morbid and unhealthy. Mrs. Henshaw's voice shook slightly. Miss Hathaway, the dowager, has been dead less than a month. To remove her portrait so soon is not merely insensitive. It is cruel. Has His Grace been informed of this? He has been locked in his study for days, seeing no one. Lady Camilla claims he has given her carte blanche to manage household matters during his period of grief, but I do not believe it. The Duke would never authorize such disrespect to his mother's memory. Clara stood, decision crystallizing. I will speak with him. Are you certain that is wise? Mrs. Henshaw asked. After what passed between you before the ball, I would not wish to see you subjected to further harsh words. His Grace is in pain and being manipulated by someone who should be offering comfort, not asserting dominance, Clara replied firmly. If he dismisses me for overstepping, so be it, but I will not stand by while Lady Camilla erases Adelaide's presence from this house. She found Edmund in his study, as Mrs. Henshaw had said, surrounded by papers and ledgers, but apparently accomplishing nothing. He looked haggard, his face drawn, dark circles beneath his eyes speaking of sleepless nights. When Clara knocked and entered, he looked up with an expression that cycled rapidly through surprise, wariness, and something that might have been relief. Miss Hathaway, I was not expecting you. Forgive the intrusion, Your Grace, but there is a matter that requires your immediate attention. Clara kept her voice professional, determined not to let emotion colour this conversation. Lady Camilla has been making changes to the household without your knowledge or approval. Edmund's brow furrowed. What manner of changes? Clara outlined what Mrs. Henshaw had reported, watching his expression darken with each detail. When she mentioned the portrait, his hand clenched into a fist on the desk. She did what? Mrs. Henshaw refused to allow it naturally, but Lady Camilla was quite insistent. She claimed to be acting on your authority. Edmund rose abruptly, striding to the window to stare out at the grounds with his back rigid. I gave no such authority. I have barely spoken to Camilla since the funeral. She visits daily, but I have been unable to receive her properly. She appears to be taking advantage of your grief to establish herself as mistress of Silverton, ahead of your marriage, Clara said quietly, and she is doing so in ways that dishonor your mother's memory. Edmund turned back to her, and the anguish in his face made Clara's heart ache. I do not know what to do. My mother's dying words were a condemnation of my choice, a plea to reconsider. But the betrothal was announced publicly before all of society. To break it now would be to create a scandal of massive proportions. Would scandal be worse than a lifetime of misery? For me, perhaps not. But such a scandal would touch others as well. It would make my mother's final moments the subject of gossip. Her illness would be questioned, her judgment impugned. He moved back to his desk, sinking into the chair. I have been trying to find a way forward that does not dishonor her memory, while also honoring my commitment to Camilla. So far, I have found none. Clara wanted to go to him, to offer comfort as she had the night Adelaide died. But the distance between them, erected by Camilla's poison and Edmund's wounded pride, held her back. Your Grace, there is something else you should know. Before your mother passed, she asked me to observe Lady Camilla, to watch for evidence of the mercenary motives she suspected. I agreed, and what I observed troubled me deeply. Edmund looked up sharply. So it was true. You were gathering information at my mother's request. Yes, but not for the reasons you believed. Your mother worried for your happiness, not your eligibility. She feared you were repeating the mistake of your first marriage, choosing duty over genuine affection. And what did you observe, Miss Hathaway? What damning evidence did you collect? There was bitterness in his tone, but Clara pressed on. I observed a woman who speaks of your estates and investments with greater passion than she speaks of you, Who plans changes to Silverton before she has any right to do so? Who views your tenants and charitable works as inconveniences to be eliminated rather than responsibilities to be upheld? I observed a woman who wants to be a duchess, Your Grace, but shows little interest in being your wife. The words hung between them, and for a long moment Edmund said nothing. Finally he spoke, his voice weary. I have observed the same things, Miss Hathaway. I am not blind, merely trapped by circumstances of my own making. A knock at the door interrupted them. Edmund's secretary, Mr. Philip Danvers, entered with a slight bow. Your Grace, forgive the interruption, but you did ask me to report immediately when I had completed the inquiry you requested. Edmund glanced at Clara, then nodded. Yes, Danvers. What have you discovered? Danvers opened a leather portfolio, extracting several documents. Your suspicions regarding the Marquis of Greymoor's financial situation were correct, Your Grace. He is deeply in debt, to the sum of nearly £80,000. Most of this is owed to various moneylenders and gaming establishments in London. Without a substantial influx of capital, he faces ruin within the year. Clara felt her breath catch. £80,000 was a staggering sum. And Lady Camilla? Edmund asked quietly. Is she aware of her father's situation? More than aware, Your Grace. According to my sources, she has been actively involved in managing the creditors, negotiating extensions, and seeking a solution to the family's difficulties. Danvers hesitated. There is also evidence that she made inquiries about your financial holdings before the betrothal was discussed, specifically asking about liquid assets and unentailed properties. Edmund's expression had gone cold, the grief-stricken son replaced by the Duke in full command of his faculties. Thank you, Danvers. Please prepare a detailed report with all supporting documentation. I wish to review everything. Of course, Your Grace. Danvers bowed and departed, leaving Edmund and Clara alone once more. So my mother was right, Edmund said flatly. Camilla is marrying me to save her family from bankruptcy. It would appear so, Clara replied gently, though perhaps she has convinced herself that practical considerations and genuine affection can coexist. Edmund laughed without humour. How diplomatic you are, Miss Hathaway. We both know the truth. I am a solution to her father's problems, nothing more. He stood and moved to the door. I must speak with the Marquess. Will you excuse me? Of course. Your Grace, what will you do? Edmund paused, his hand on the door handle. I do not yet know, but I will not allow my mother's memory to be dishonoured, nor will I allow Lady Camilla to continue behaving as though Silverton is already hers to command. Clara watched him go, hope and fear warring in her chest. Perhaps there was still a chance that Adelaide's dying wish might be fulfilled. 2 hours later, raised voices echoed through the corridors of Silverton Manor. Clara was in the Dowager's former sitting room, carefully packing away Adelaide's personal correspondence, when Mrs. Henshaw appeared looking flustered. You must come quickly, Miss Hathaway. His Grace has confronted the Marquess in the library, and Lady Camilla has joined them. I fear matters are escalating. Clara hurried down the corridor, arriving outside the library, just as Lord Reginald Weston's voice boomed through the heavy door. You dare to question my honour, sir. You insult my family with these accusations. I question nothing, came Edmund's voice, cold and hard. I state facts supported by documentation. Your debts are a matter of record, Lord Weston, as is your daughter's remarkably specific interest in my financial affairs before our betrothal was announced. A pause. Then the Marquis spoke again, his bluster deflating. Very well. Yes, we have encountered some financial difficulties. What family of our station has not? The wars have disrupted trade. Investments have failed. These are temporary setbacks, nothing more. £80,000 is not a temporary setback, Edmund replied. It is catastrophic, and I believe you viewed my marriage to your daughter as the solution to your catastrophe. Edmund, how can you say such things? This was Camilla's voice, high and strained. I love you. My father's financial situation has nothing to do with our engagement. Does it not? Then why did you inquire about my unentailed properties before we ever discussed marriage? Why did you ask my man of business about liquid assets and investment returns? I was merely being practical. A duchess must understand the resources available to her household. Before she is even engaged. Edmund's voice dripped skepticism. That seems remarkably presumptuous, Lady Camilla. Clara heard movement within the library, footsteps pacing. Then Camilla spoke again, her tone shifting to something sharper, more dangerous. Very well. Let us speak plainly, since you seem determined to destroy what we have built together. Yes, my father has debts. Yes, your fortune would alleviate those difficulties. But let us not pretend this is unique in our world, Edmund. Half the matches made each season are based on similarly practical considerations. You knew I was not some silly girl marrying for love. You valued my practicality, my understanding of duty and position. Do not now condemn me for the very qualities you claim to appreciate. There is a difference between practical consideration and mercenary calculation, Edmund replied. Is there? Because from where I stand, the only difference is that you were confronted with evidence of what you already suspected and now seek justification to break our engagement. Tell me true, Your Grace. Does this have anything to do with that insipid companion of your mother's? Clara's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. Miss Hathaway has nothing to do with this discussion, Edmund said, his voice dangerously quiet. Does she not? I have seen how you look at her, Edmund. How you sought her company, her opinions, her approval. Your mother certainly pushed you toward her with all the subtlety of a battering ram. Is this truly about my father's debts? Or is it about your desire to follow your heart rather than your head for once in your privileged life? A long silence followed. Then Edmund spoke, and Clara's blood ran cold at what she heard. You will leave Silverton immediately, Lady Camilla. You and your father both. I require time to consider my options without your presence clouding my judgment. You cannot mean to break the engagement, the Marquis sputtered. The scandal would be enormous. That is my concern, not yours. If you do this, Camilla said, her voice dropping to something ugly and threatening, I will ensure the scandal touches more than just you. I will tell all of London that your mother was senile in her final months, that she made wild accusations because her mind had failed. I will suggest that you manipulated a sick woman into changing her will to your advantage, cutting out your father's brothers who had every right to expect bequests. And I will whisper that you were conducting an improper liaison with Miss Hathaway, even as your mother lay dying, that the two of you plotted together to undermine my position. Clara felt the room spin around her. The cruelty of it, the calculated malice, took her breath away. You would spread such lies. Edmund's voice shook with rage. I would speak what many already suspect, Camilla countered. Your mother's public condemnation of me at the ball was witnessed by hundreds. My version of events would merely provide an explanation that preserves her dignity while acknowledging her diminished capacity. As for Miss Hathaway, she has been the subject of gossip since before the engagement was announced. It would require very little effort to convince society that there was truth behind the whispers. Get out, Edmund said, each word falling like a stone. Get out of my house immediately. Edmund, please, let us discuss this rationally. Out! The library door flew open and Camilla emerged, her face flushed with anger. She froze when she saw Clara standing in the corridor, and something vicious flashed in her eyes. Ah, Miss Hathaway, were you eavesdropping? How very appropriate. You should know that whatever fantasies you have been entertaining about stepping into my place, they are just that, fantasies. The Duke is bound to me by honour, and even if he were not, he would never demean himself by marrying so far beneath his station. Clara lifted her chin, refusing to be cowed. I have no such fantasies, Lady Camilla. Unlike some, I do not view every interaction as a move in a game of social chess. Camilla's lip curled. How noble. How tragically noble. Enjoy your moral superiority, Miss Hathaway. I assure you, it will keep you warm at night in whatever dreary situation you find yourself. Once Edmund comes to his senses and realizes he needs a wife who can actually help him, not some impoverished nobody who thinks reading poetry makes her his equal. She swept past, her father following with considerably less dignity, and moments later, the sound of their carriage departing echoed through the manor. Edmund emerged from the library, looking as though he had aged 10 years in the past 2 hours. He saw Clara and stopped, some of the hardness leaving his expression. "You heard," he said. It was not a question. "I did. Your Grace, I am so sorry. I never intended—" "I know." He held up a hand. "I know this was none of your doing, Miss Hathaway. The fault lies entirely with me and my blindness to Camilla's true nature. My mother tried to warn me, and I would not listen. What will you do now?" Edmund leaned against the doorframe, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. "I am trapped. If I break the engagement, Camilla will carry out her threats. My mother's memory will be tainted, her charity work questioned as the fancy of a failing mind. And you, Miss Hathaway, you will be destroyed by association, branded as an opportunist and worse. I cannot allow that to happen." Clara's heart sank even as she understood the nobility behind his decision. "So you will marry her?" "I see no alternative. Unless—" He trailed off, then seemed to gather himself. "Unless Camilla herself provides grounds for breaking the engagement without scandal. If she were to be caught in some indiscretion, some behavior that society would deem unacceptable, then the broken engagement would be seen as justified." "That seems unlikely," Clara said quietly. "Lady Camilla is too calculating to make such a mistake." "Yes," Edmund agreed. "She is indeed." They stood in the corridor, the weight of impossible choices pressing down upon them both. Finally, Edmund straightened. "I have demanded she stay away from Silverton until the wedding. At least we will have some peace for a time. And I will continue to think, to search for some solution that does not require me to sacrifice my happiness or my honour. I hope you find one, Your Grace." Edmund's gaze softened. "Clara, I must tell you something. These past weeks, even in my grief, the moments when I felt most myself were the moments spent in conversation with you. My mother was right about many things, but especially this. You see me, not the title or the fortune or the expectations, just me. That is a rare gift, and I have been a fool not to value it more highly." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "It changes nothing. You are still bound to Lady Camilla." "For now," Edmund said. "But I will find a way, Clara. I swear it. I will find a way." But as Clara lay sleepless in her bed that night, she could not share his optimism. The walls were too high, the obstacles too great. Edmund Fairfax would marry Camilla Weston because honour demanded it, and Clara would have to watch it happen, unless she removed herself from the equation entirely. In the morning, Clara sat at her small writing desk and penned a letter to her Aunt Lavinia in Bath. The position as governess was still available, her aunt confirmed in her reply that arrived 3 days later, and Clara was welcome to come immediately. She packed her belongings with heavy heart, folding away the few gowns she owned, the books Adelaide had given her, the small keepsakes of her time at Silverton. When all was ready, she requested an audience with Edmund to inform him formally of her departure. He received her in his study, and the devastation in his eyes when she announced her intentions nearly broke her resolve. "You are leaving," he said dully. "When?" "Tomorrow morning, if a carriage can be arranged to take me to the coaching inn." "Of course, whatever you need." Edmund rose and moved to the window, his back to her. "This is my fault. I have driven you away." "No, Your Grace. I simply cannot remain here knowing what is to come. It would be too painful." He turned back to her then, and the raw emotion in his face stole her breath. "Clara, if circumstances were different—" "But they are not," she interrupted gently. "You are to be married, and I am a woman with no fortune and no prospects. We inhabit different worlds, Your Grace, and we must accept that." "I do not accept it," Edmund said fiercely. "I will not accept it. You have no choice." They stood facing each other across an impossible divide, and Clara saw in his eyes the same aching loss she felt in her own heart. "I should go," she whispered. "There are still preparations to be made." Edmund nodded, unable to speak. As Clara reached the door, his voice stopped her. "Clara, thank you for everything you did for my mother, and for showing me, however briefly, what it might feel like to be truly seen and valued. The honour was entirely mine, Your Grace." She fled before the tears could fall, seeking the sanctuary of her chamber to weep for all that might have been and never would be. In a matter of weeks, she would leave Silverton Manor behind. In a matter of weeks, she would begin the process of forgetting Edmund Fairfax and the impossible dream of a future they could never share. The day could not come soon enough, and yet each morning seemed to carry her closer to it with merciless speed. Part 5. 3 weeks had passed since Clara announced her intention to leave Silverton Manor, weeks during which Edmund had maintained a careful distance that she interpreted as resignation. He had arranged for a carriage to be made available for her journey to Bath, had ensured she received full compensation for her service, and had even written a letter of reference that was far more generous than her position warranted. But he had not asked her to stay. Clara told herself this was for the best. Edmund would marry Camilla Weston, as duty demanded, and Clara would begin her new life as a governess to her aunt's charges, teaching young ladies their letters and deportment, while trying not to remember the brief, shining weeks when she had felt truly valued for who she was, rather than what position she occupied. The evening before her departure, Silverton Manor hosted what Edmund termed a small supper, though Clara suspected it was anything but small. She had overheard Mrs. Henshaw discussing the guest list, which included not only Camilla and the Marquis of Greymore, but also several influential families from the surrounding counties. It seemed Edmund was making an effort to reintegrate himself into society after the period of mourning, to present a united front with his future bride. Clara had not been invited to join the supper party, naturally. Her status as departing employee placed her well outside the circle of those who would dine at the Duke's table. Instead, she took a tray in her chamber and tried to focus on finishing her packing, though her hands trembled as she folded the last of her gowns. A knock at her door revealed Mrs. Henshaw, her expression troubled. "Miss Hathaway, I know you wish to remain apart from the evening's festivities, but Lady Camilla has been asking after you. She wishes to bid you farewell before you depart tomorrow." Clara's stomach clenched with unease. "That is unnecessary, truly. I would not wish to intrude on the gathering." "I said as much." But she was quite insistent. She suggested you might join her for a brief walk in the gardens before supper is served. She claimed she wanted to apologize for harsh words spoken in the heat of the moment. The very idea of Camilla apologizing seemed so unlikely that Clara immediately suspected an ulterior motive. "I see. And His Grace is aware of this invitation?" "He was not present when Lady Camilla made the request," Mrs. Henshaw admitted. "Miss Hathaway, I do not trust that woman's intentions." "Perhaps you should decline." "Perhaps," Clara agreed. "But if she is to be Duchess of Silverton, it would be unwise to create animosity before my departure. I will meet with her briefly, but I will remain cautious." 20 minutes later, Clara made her way to the terrace that overlooked the formal gardens. The October evening was cool but clear, the last light of sunset painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Several guests had already arrived and were taking refreshments in the drawing room, their voices and laughter drifting through the open windows. Clara waited on the terrace for several minutes, wondering if Camilla had forgotten her request entirely, when movement in the gardens below caught her attention. 2 figures stood among the sculpted hedges, partially concealed by shadows, but visible enough that Clara recognized one as Lady Camilla Weston. The other was a man Clara did not know, tall and thin with a sharp-featured face and clothing that suggested professional standing rather than aristocratic birth. Their body language spoke of tension and urgency. The man gestured emphatically, while Camilla shook her head, clearly agitated. Clara knew she should retreat, that witnessing a private conversation was improper, but something in the intensity of their exchange held her in place. Then the wind shifted, carrying their voices up to where Clara stood frozen on the terrace. "The timeline must be accelerated," the man was saying, his voice cultured, but with an edge that made Clara's skin prickle with unease. "Once the marriage is formalized, you will have perhaps 6 months before suspicions arise. The documentation must be in place before then." "6 months is not enough time, Finch," Camilla hissed. "Edmund is meticulous about his affairs. He reviews every document, questions every expenditure. I cannot simply forge his signature and hope he fails to notice." Finch. Clara's mind raced. Where had she heard that name before? "That is why we establish a pattern of delegation," Finch replied patiently. as though explaining to a slow child. Small matters at first, handled on your authority as his wife. Charitable donations, household expenses, minor repairs to secondary properties. Gradually, the steward and staff become accustomed to seeing your signature alongside his. Then, when the larger transfers occur, they will seem routine rather than suspicious. And if he notices before the properties are fully transferred, then we move to the secondary plan. You express concern about his erratic behavior, his mood swings, his increasingly poor judgment. You suggest, very reluctantly, that the grief over his mother's death has affected his mental faculties. With the right physicians making the right diagnoses, you can have him declared incompetent to manage his own affairs. Clara's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp of horror. This was not merely financial scheming. This was a calculated plot to steal everything Edmund owned and potentially destroy him in the process. What about his family? Camilla asked, her voice holding less resistance than Clara would have hoped to hear. His father's brothers will contest any such declaration. They are minor country lords, with no real power or influence. Finch dismissed. And they were already disinherited from the Silverton estates by the late Duke's will. They have no standing to challenge your control, once you are his legal wife, and hold power of attorney over his affairs. Camilla paced among the hedges, her crimson gown a dark stain against the twilight. You make it sound so simple, Cornelius. But Edmund is not a fool. He will fight any attempt to undermine him. Not if he is properly managed, Finch replied. And the cold calculation in his voice made Clara shudder. You handled Lord Harrington quite effectively, after all. The poor man was so confused by the end he could barely remember his own name, let alone question where his money was going. Harrington was different. He was already elderly and in declining health. The accident simply hastened the inevitable. Accident, Finch repeated with audible skepticism. Yes, how fortunate that he fell down the stairs so conveniently after signing over the last of his liquid assets. You have quite a talent for arranging such accidents, my dear. Clara felt the world tilt around her. They were discussing murder. Camilla had killed before, and she was planning to do the same to Edmund if her other schemes failed. Watch your tongue, Finch, Camilla snapped. I pay you for your legal expertise, not your commentary on past events. Now, do you have the documents prepared or not? I have preliminary drafts. Once the marriage is formalized, you will need to bring them to the Duke for signature. Tell him they are standard marital settlement paperwork, adjustments to ensure your financial security in the event of his death. Most men sign such documents without thorough review, especially if presented by a loving wife concerned with practical matters. And if he refuses, then we proceed with alternative measures. But I doubt it will come to that. The Duke of Silverton is, by all accounts, an honourable man who keeps his commitments. That very honour will be his downfall. Camilla laughed, a sound devoid of warmth or genuine amusement. How ironic. Very well, Finch. Have everything ready. We marry in the spring as planned, and by the following autumn, I will control the Silverton fortune entirely. And my fee? Will be paid as agreed, 10% of all assets successfully transferred, plus bonuses for any additional services required. They began moving back toward the house, and Clara realized with panic that she was standing in plain sight on the terrace. She ducked behind a marble column just as they emerged from the garden path, her heart hammering so hard she feared they might hear it. Camilla and Finch parted at the base of the terrace steps, Finch disappearing around the side of the house, while Camilla smoothed her gown and arranged her expression into one of pleasant composure, before ascending to rejoin her guests. Clara remained frozen behind the column long after both had gone, her mind struggling to process what she had witnessed. This was not merely greed or social ambition. This was a criminal conspiracy, potentially involving murder. Edmund was not just making an unwise marriage. He was walking into a trap that could cost him everything, possibly even his life. But what could Clara do with this information? She had no proof beyond her word against that of a marquis's daughter. If she went to Edmund now, on the eve of her departure, it would seem exactly like what Camilla had accused her of before, a desperate attempt by a woman with romantic feelings to undermine his engagement. Clara made her way back inside through a servant's entrance, her thoughts racing. She needed help, Someone with authority and resources to investigate Camilla's claims about this Lord Harrington, to examine Finch's background and practices, to build a case that could not be dismissed as jealous fantasy. She needed Mr. Philip Danvers. Finding Mrs. Henshaw in the housekeeper's sitting room, Clara drew the older woman aside. "I need you to send for Mr. Danvers immediately. Tell him it is urgent, but do not specify why, and tell him to come discreetly, not through the main entrance." Mrs. Henshaw searched Clara's face, reading the fear and determination there. "What has happened?" "I cannot explain yet, not until I have spoken with Mr. Danvers. Please, Mrs. Henshaw, trust me when I say this is a matter of life and death." The housekeeper nodded slowly. "Very well. I will send young Thomas with a message. Mr. Danvers lives only 3 miles distant. He should be here within the hour." Clara retreated to the small parlour reserved for the housekeeper's use, pacing its confines while she tried to organise her thoughts. Through the walls, she could hear the murmur of conversation and laughter from the supper party, the clink of crystal and china, the ordinary sounds of a social gathering entirely unaware of the darkness lurking beneath its civilized surface. Mr. Danvers arrived in less than an hour, entering through the kitchen entrance as Clara had requested. He was a man of perhaps 40, with intelligent eyes and a manner that suggested both competence and discretion. "Miss Hathaway, Mrs. Henshaw said you required my assistance urgently. How may I be of service?" Clara gestured for him to sit, then relayed everything she had witnessed in the garden. She repeated the conversation as accurately as she could recall, watching as Danvers's expression grew increasingly grave. "Cornelius Finch," he said when she finished. "I know that name. He is an attorney of sorts, though his practice is not reputable. He has been involved in several cases of disputed wills and questionable property transfers. Nothing proven, but enough whispers that honest solicitors avoid association with him. And this Lord Harrington that Lady Camilla mentioned." Danvers frowned in concentration. Harrington. The name is familiar. Give me a moment." He rose and paced, clearly searching his memory. "Ah, yes. Lord Tobias Harrington, an elderly baron from Sussex. He died perhaps 2 years ago in a fall down the stairs at his country house. There was some controversy at the time, because he had recently changed his will to leave everything to a young woman he had apparently married only months before his death." "A young woman," Clara repeated, her blood running cold. "Do you recall her name?" "I do not. The matter was settled out of court between the new widow and Harrington's estranged children, but I can certainly make inquiries." Danvers fixed her with a penetrating look. "Miss Hathaway, if what you overheard is accurate, this is not merely unethical behaviour. This is fraud, potentially murder. Are you absolutely certain of what you heard?" "I am certain. And Mr. Danvers, His Grace is in genuine danger. Lady Camilla is planning to either steal his fortune through forgery or have him declared incompetent. And if those plans fail, I fear she will arrange an accident similar to what befell Lord Harrington." Danvers sat back down heavily. "This is serious indeed, but we must proceed carefully. Lady Camilla is the daughter of a marquess engaged to a duke. We cannot simply accuse her without ironclad evidence. If we are wrong, or if we cannot prove our claims, the consequences for all of us would be severe. I understand, but we must act quickly. I depart for Bath in the morning, and once I am gone, there will be no one here who knows what Camilla is planning. His Grace will be vulnerable, isolated." "Then you must delay your departure," Danvers said firmly, "at least until I can conduct an investigation. I will begin tonight. I have contacts in London who can make inquiries about both Finch and this Harrington matter. I will also look into Lady Camilla's background more thoroughly. If she has done this before, there will be traces, patterns of behaviour that can be documented. How long will such an investigation take? If I work through the night and call in favours, I can have preliminary results by morning, more detailed information within 2 or 3 days." He stood, already mentally organising his tasks. "Miss Hathaway, you must act as though nothing has changed. Do not alter your behaviour in any way that might alert Lady Camilla to your knowledge." "Can you do that?" Clara thought of sitting through breakfast tomorrow while Camilla smiled and planned Edmund's destruction. The idea made her stomach turn, but she nodded. "I can manage it." "Good. I will return as soon as I have information worth sharing. In the meantime, you should try to rest. You look exhausted." After Danvers departed, Clara returned to her chamber, but sleep was impossible. She stood at her window watching the stars wheel overhead, thinking of Edmund somewhere below, hosting a supper party that included the woman planning to destroy him. She thought of Adelaide's dying words, her plea that Edmund be protected, be shown the truth about Camilla. The Dowager had trusted Clara to help, and Clara had failed. She had been preparing to flee to Bath, to abandon Edmund to his fate because the situation seemed hopeless. But it was not hopeless. Not yet. Adelaide had given her one final gift, a chance to save her son from a fate worse than an unhappy marriage. Clara would not waste it. As dawn broke over Silverton Manor, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Clara made a decision. She would not leave today. She would not leave until she knew Edmund was safe, no matter what it cost her personally. Somewhere in the house, Camilla Weston was likely sleeping peacefully, confident in her schemes and her security. And somewhere else, Mr. Philip Danvers was working through the night to uncover the truth that would bring those schemes crashing down. By the time the morning sun fully illuminated Silverton's grounds, Clara had not slept at all. But her mind was clear, her resolve firm. The battle for Edmund's future was not over. In fact, it was only just beginning. Part 6, the morning that should have marked Clara Hathaway's departure from Silverton Manor instead, dawned with a knock at her door before the sun had fully risen. Mrs. Henshaw stood in the corridor, still in her dressing gown, her expression a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Mr. Danvers has returned, Miss Hathaway. He says he has urgent news and requests your presence in the housekeeper's sitting room immediately." Clara dressed hurriedly, her fingers clumsy with anticipation and dread. When she entered the small parlour, she found Danvers looking haggard but grimly satisfied, surrounded by papers and documents spread across every available surface. "Miss Hathaway," he greeted her, his voice rough with exhaustion. "I have spent the night calling in every favour I possessed, and what I have discovered confirms your worst fears. Lady Camilla Weston is not merely an opportunist. She is a criminal of the most calculating variety." He gestured to the documents. "Lord Tobias Harrington died 2 years ago, as I mentioned. What I did not know was that the young woman he married mere months before his death was Lady Camilla herself, using her mother's maiden name of Thornley. She wed him quietly, in a ceremony, witnessed by only 2 people, both of whom have since conveniently relocated to the Americas." Clara sank into a chair, her legs suddenly unsteady. She married him? She did. And in the 4 months between their marriage and his death, she managed to convince the elderly lord to transfer nearly £40,000 into accounts she controlled, ostensibly for investments that would benefit them both. When he began questioning these transfers, he suffered his fatal fall down the stairs. Danvers's expression was grim. The local magistrate ruled it an accident, but the physician who examined the body noted bruising inconsistent with a simple fall. His concerns were overruled. "Dear God," Clara whispered. "There is more. I contacted a clerk in Cornelius Finch's office, a young man who has grown increasingly troubled by his employer's practices. For a sum I assured him would be paid, he provided copies of documents Finch has been preparing on Lady Camilla's behalf. They include property transfer agreements designed to look like routine marital settlements, but actually granting Lady Camilla near complete control over Silverton's unentailed properties. There are also drafts of medical testimonies declaring the Duke mentally incompetent, ready to be signed by physicians Finch has used in similar schemes before." Clara felt sick. "This is monstrous." "It is systematic and premeditated," Danvers agreed. The clerk also revealed that Finch boasted to his staff about how easily Lady Camilla had managed Lord Harrington's estate after his death. He called her a natural at the work, which suggests she's been involved in similar schemes beyond just the Harrington matter. "What do we do now?" Clara asked. "Will this evidence be sufficient to expose her?" "More than sufficient. But we must act carefully. His Grace must be informed immediately, before Lady Camilla has any opportunity to learn we are investigating her." Danvers began gathering the documents into his leather portfolio, I will request an audience with the Duke now. Miss Hathaway, I will need you to corroborate what you witnessed in the gardens. Your testimony, combined with this evidence, will leave no room for doubt. Within the hour, they were in Edmund's study. He had been awake since early morning, preparing correspondence, and looked up in surprise as Danvers and Clara were announced together. "This is unexpected," Edmund said, rising from behind his desk. "Miss Hathaway, I thought you would be well on your way to Bath by now." "Mr. Danvers asked me to delay my departure, Your Grace. There is a matter of extreme urgency that requires your immediate attention." Something in Clara's tone made Edmund's expression sharpen. "Very well. Danvers, what is this about?" "Your Grace, what I am about to tell you will be difficult to hear, but I beg you to listen carefully to everything before making any judgment." Danvers opened his portfolio and began laying documents across Edmund's desk. "Last evening, Miss Hathaway witnessed a conversation between Lady Camilla Weston and a man named Cornelius Finch in the gardens. The nature of that conversation was deeply troubling. Clara related what she had overheard, watching Edmund's face grow progressively darker. When she reached the part about Lord Harrington's convenient accident, Edmund's hands clenched into fists on his desk. "Are you certain of what you heard?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Absolutely certain, Your Grace. They spoke of forging your signature, having you declared incompetent, and if necessary, arranging an accident similar to what befell Lord Harrington." Edmund turned to Danvers. "And you have verified these claims?" "I have, Your Grace. Lord Tobias Harrington was indeed married to Lady Camilla under her mother's maiden name, mere months before his death. She inherited his considerable fortune after his children settled, rather than endure a lengthy legal battle." Danvers pushed forward several documents. "These are copies of the transfer papers Finch has been preparing. They would grant Lady Camilla control over virtually all of your unentailed properties while making it appear to be standard marital settlement." Edmund examined the papers, his expression growing colder with each page. "These are sophisticated. They would fool most people upon casual review." "Exactly as intended, Your Grace. And these," Danvers produced another set of documents, "are draft medical testimonies declaring you mentally incompetent to manage your own affairs. Finch has 3 physicians prepared to sign them upon Lady Camilla's request, for a fee naturally." "Who are these physicians?" "Dr. Marcus Welby, who has twice been censured by the Royal College of Physicians for questionable diagnoses. Dr. Samuel Pritchard, currently under investigation for accepting payment to certify elderly patients as incompetent so their relatives could seize control of their estates. And Dr. Henry Moss, who lost his position at St. Bartholomew's Hospital after allegations of fraud." Edmund set down the papers with elaborate care, as though fighting to control his temper. "So Lady Camilla Weston is not merely a woman marrying for financial security. She is a criminal who has killed before and plans to either rob me through forgery or have me declared mad so she can seize my estate legally. That is the situation in summary, Your Grace." For a long moment, Edmund said nothing. He rose and moved to the window, staring out at the grounds with his back rigid. When he finally spoke, his voice was absolutely frigid. "Send word to Lord Weston. Tell him I require his presence and that of his daughter immediately. Tell him the matter is urgent and will not wait." "Your Grace, are you certain?" Danvers began. "I am certain," Edmund cut him off. "I will not allow this woman one more hour of freedom to plot against me or anyone else. She will face what she has done, and she will do so today." The Marquis of Greymore arrived within 2 hours, looking irritated at being summoned so peremptorily. Camilla accompanied him, her expression carefully arranged into one of concerned confusion. "Edmund, what is the meaning of this urgent summons?" the Marquis demanded as they were shown into the library. "We had plans for the afternoon. Those plans are cancelled." Edmund replied coldly. "Please, sit, both of you. Mr. Danvers will join us as well." Camilla's eyes flickered to Clara, who stood near the door, and something dangerous flashed in their depths. "Is your mother's companion to be present for private family discussions now?" "Miss Hathaway will indeed be present, as her testimony is material to this matter." Edmund gestured to the chairs. "Sit, now." The Marquis, catching the Duke's tone, complied with visible unease. Camilla followed more slowly, her composure beginning to crack at the edges. Edmund remained standing, a position of dominance that was clearly intentional. "Lord Weston, I regret to inform you that I am breaking my engagement to your daughter, effective immediately." "What?" The Marquis surged to his feet. "You cannot be serious. The betrothal was announced publicly. The scandal will be considerable, I have no doubt. However, it pales in comparison to the scandal of discovering after marriage that my wife is a murderess and a fraud." The silence that followed was absolute. Camilla had gone very still, her face draining of colour. "That is a monstrous accusation," the Marquis said, his bluster fading into uncertainty. "You cannot possibly—" "Can I not?" Edmund turned to Danvers. "Please share with Lord Weston what we have discovered." Danvers stepped forward and methodically laid out the evidence. The marriage to Lord Harrington, the suspicious financial transfers, the convenient death, the forged documents prepared by Cornelius Finch. With each revelation, the Marquis seemed to age, his face sagging with horror and disbelief. "Camilla," he said finally, his voice hoarse, "tell me this is not true. Tell me you did not do these things." Camilla's composure had shattered entirely. "It is all lies," she cried, pointing at Clara. "She has fabricated this entire story because she wants to take my place. She has been trying to seduce Edmund since the moment she arrived at Silverton." "Miss Hathaway did not fabricate the marriage certificate," Edmund said coldly. "She did not create the financial records showing Lord Harrington's money flowing into accounts you controlled. She did not forge the documents in Cornelius Finch's office." "Finch?" Camilla seized on the name. "Yes, it was all Finch. He approached me, offered to help with my father's debts. I had no idea his methods were criminal. I am as much a victim as anyone." "So you deny knowing about the forged property transfers?" Danvers asked mildly. "You deny the conversation Miss Hathaway overheard in which you discussed the timeline for stealing the Duke's fortune?" "She is lying about that conversation. She was not even in the gardens." "But I was," came Mrs. Henshaw's voice from the doorway. All eyes turned to see the housekeeper standing with her arms crossed. "I saw you enter the gardens with a man I now know to be Mr. Finch, and I saw Miss Hathaway on the terrace afterward, white as a sheet and clearly shaken by something she had witnessed. I did not understand why at the time, but I do now." Camilla's last defense crumbled. She collapsed back into her chair, her face in her hands. "You do not understand," she said, her voice muffled. "My father's debts, the pressure, the expectations. I did what I had to do to survive." "You murdered a man," Edmund said, each word falling like a stone. "And you plan to do the same to me if your other schemes failed. That is not survival, Lady Camilla. That is evil." The Marquis looked at his daughter as though seeing her for the first time, horror and grief mingling in his expression. "What have you become?" he whispered. Camilla's head snapped up, her eyes wild. "What I had to become? Did you think your debts would magically disappear? Did you think our family could maintain its position with £80,000 owed to creditors? I was trying to save us." "By killing people?" her father asked, anguish thick in his voice. "By doing what was necessary." Camilla turned back to Edmund, desperation evident. "Edmund, please, we can still make this work. I will end my association with Finch. I will manage your estates honestly. I swear it. Just do not cast me aside. The scandal will destroy both of us." "I will weather the scandal," Edmund replied. "And if you attempt to spread the rumours you threatened before about my mother or Miss Hathaway, I will have you prosecuted for conspiracy to commit fraud and murder. The evidence Danvers has gathered is more than sufficient to see you transported or hanged." Camilla's face twisted with rage and fear. "You would not dare. I am a Marquis's daughter." "A Marquis's daughter who is also a criminal," Edmund countered. "Your father's title will not protect you from the consequences of your actions." The Marquis stood slowly, seeming to have aged a decade in the past hour. "Camilla, we are leaving, immediately. I will not allow you to bring further disgrace upon our family." "Father, no." His voice cracked like a whip. "I will arrange for you to leave England, to go to my sister's estate in Scotland. You will remain there, out of society, for the foreseeable future, and you will consider yourself fortunate that His Grace is willing to keep the full extent of your crimes private, rather than seeing you prosecuted. I am not willing, Edmund corrected. I am pragmatic. A trial would indeed create scandal for all involved. But make no mistake, Lord Weston, if your daughter ever attempts to return to London or to threaten anyone I care about, I will ensure the full truth becomes known. Camilla rose unsteadily, her earlier beauty haggard now, replaced by something desperate and defeated. As she was led from the library by her father, she cast one final venomous look at Clara. This should have been mine, she hissed. All of it. You have stolen what was mine. It was never yours, Clara replied quietly. And it never would have been, even without my presence. You cannot steal a person's heart, Lady Camilla. It must be given freely. After they departed, the library fell silent except for the ticking of the mantel clock. Edmund sank into a chair, looking exhausted. Thank you, he said finally, addressing both Clara and Danvers. You may well have saved my life. We did what honour required, Your Grace, Danvers replied. I will begin spreading carefully worded information through appropriate channels. By the time society learns of the broken engagement, they will also know enough about Lady Camilla's character to understand why it was necessary. After Danvers excused himself, Edmund and Clara were left alone. He looked at her with an expression that held gratitude, remorse, and something deeper that made her breath catch. You were leaving this morning, he said. You were going to Bath to become a governess, and I was going to let you go because I thought I had no choice. You did have no choice, until last night, Clara replied. Camilla held you hostage with her threats, and you freed me. Edmund rose and crossed to where she stood. Clara, I have been a fool, a blind, stubborn fool, who nearly threw away something precious because I was too concerned with duty and honour to see that the greatest dishonour would have been marrying a woman I did not love, while the woman I do love slipped away. Clara's heart stuttered. Your Grace. Edmund, he corrected gently. Please, Clara, just Edmund. Edmund, she whispered. You cannot mean what you are saying. I am still the same person I was yesterday. A woman with no fortune, no connections, no... You are the woman who sat with my mother through her final hours, who cared enough to risk everything to save me from a terrible fate, who saw me, truly saw me. Not the title or the wealth, but the man beneath. He took her hands in his. And you are the woman I love, Clara. I think I have loved you since that first morning in the fields when you spoke of irrigation systems with such passion that I forgot to be the Duke for a blessed hour. Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks. The scandal will be considerable. Society will say you are making an even worse match than marrying Camilla would have been. Then society can say what it likes. I have spent my entire life doing what others expected, marrying for duty, maintaining appearances, sacrificing my own happiness for the sake of propriety. My mother spent her dying breath trying to tell me that there was another way, a better way. I will not ignore her wisdom any longer. Edmund, are you certain? I have never been more certain of anything in my life. He lifted her hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. Will you stay, Clara? Not as my mother's companion, but as yourself. Will you give me the chance to court you properly, to show you that what I feel is real and lasting? Clara looked into his blue eyes and saw everything she had thought impossible reflected there. Love, hope, a future she had not dared to imagine. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will stay. Edmund pulled her into his arms then, holding her as though she were something infinitely precious. They stood together in the library, where their friendship had first bloomed, while outside the November day grew bright and clear. There would be challenges ahead, Clara knew. Society would gossip, tongues would wag, and there would be those who viewed their eventual union as scandalous. But standing in Edmund's embrace, feeling his heart beat against hers, Clara understood what Adelaide had tried to tell them both. Sometimes the greatest courage was not in fulfilling the expectations of others, but in choosing your own happiness despite them. A single whisper from a dying duchess had been enough to set everything in motion. Clara's carriage, prepared for a journey that would never be taken, sat unused in the stable yard. In its place would be a different journey entirely, one that led not away from Silverton Manor, but deeper into its heart. It was, Clara reflected, as Edmund finally released her with a promise to speak more after she had rested. The most fortunate departure she had never made. Part 7. The weeks following Camilla Weston's departure from Silverton Manor could have been fraught with scandal and whispers, and indeed there were those in society who delighted in speculating about the broken engagement. But Edmund had prepared carefully, ensuring that enough carefully chosen details about Lady Camilla's character reached the right ears, that when the formal announcement appeared in the papers, it was accompanied by a general sense that the Duke had been fortunate to discover the truth before making an irrevocable mistake. Clara remained at Silverton, though her position had shifted into something undefined and delicate. She was no longer the Dowager's companion, as Adelaide was gone, but neither was she precisely a guest. Edmund solved the ambiguity by asking her to continue overseeing the charitable programs his mother had established, giving her both purpose and a legitimate reason to remain under his roof. The 6 months of mourning that remained for Adelaide were observed with scrupulous propriety. Clara and Edmund saw each other daily, but always with Mrs. Henshaw or another servant present, always in the public rooms of the manor, always maintaining the careful distance that society demanded between an unmarried gentleman and lady. Yet within those constraints, something beautiful grew. They walked the grounds discussing improvements to the tenant farms, Edmund seeking Clara's opinion and genuinely valuing her insights. They sat in the library in the evenings, reading aloud to each other from poetry and philosophy, discovering shared tastes and gentle disagreements that led to spirited discussions. They took tea in the Dowager's former sitting room, and Clara told Edmund stories about his mother's final months, the wisdom she had shared, the love she had expressed for her son, even as she despaired of his choices. She would have liked this, Edmund said one afternoon, as they walked through the gardens where spring was beginning to assert itself. The two of us, taking time to truly know each other before making any permanent commitment. She would have liked it very much, Clara agreed, pausing to admire the early crocuses pushing through the last remnants of winter snow, though I think she would also be impatient for the mourning period to end so we could proceed with less constraint. Edmund smiled, that genuine warmth she had come to treasure lighting his features. My mother was never particularly patient when she believed herself to be right. And she was right about you, Clara. About us. Mrs. Henshaw proved to be an enthusiastic supporter of their courtship, ensuring that Clara was properly chaperoned, while also creating opportunities for private conversation. The rest of the staff followed her lead, their genuine affection for Clara evident in countless small kindnesses. The servants are taking bets on when His Grace will propose, Mrs. Henshaw confided to Clara one morning, as they reviewed the household accounts. Cook has wagered it will be in the library, since that is where you spend so many of your evenings together. Clara felt her cheeks warm. That seems rather forward of them. They are happy for you both, Mrs. Henshaw replied. This house has been sad for too long, first with the late Duchess's unhappiness, then with the Dowager's illness and death. To see His Grace smile again, to hear him laugh, it reminds us all why we are proud to serve at Silverton. Edmund began introducing Clara to society gradually, starting with intimate dinners attended by his closest friends and their wives. Clara found herself welcomed with surprising warmth by people she had expected to look down upon her reduced circumstances. My husband has spoken of nothing but your insights on modern farming techniques, Lady Hartwell told Clara at one such gathering. He is quite determined to implement your suggestions about crop rotation on our own estates. The formal reintroduction came in March, when Edmund hosted a small ball to mark the end of his mourning period. Clara wore a gown of pale lavender silk, a gift from Edmund that had been delivered with a note saying simply, "You deserve to shine." As she descended the stairs that evening, she saw Edmund waiting at the bottom, resplendent in formal black and white, and the look on his face made her feel more beautiful than any gown ever could. "You are exquisite," he said, offering his arm. "Every man in the ballroom tonight will envy me." The evening was a success by any measure. Clara moved through the assembled guests with grace, neither presuming too much nor apologizing for her presence. Those who might have snubbed her found themselves charmed instead, won over by her genuine interest in their concerns and her thoughtful observations on topics ranging from literature to local governance. It was Lady Hartwell who made the evening complete by loudly declaring to a group of influential matrons, "Miss Hathaway is exactly the sort of woman this country needs more of. Educated, but not pedantic. Compassionate, but not weak. I sincerely hope the Duke has the good sense to secure her permanently." The whispers that followed were speculative rather than condemning, and Clara understood that she had passed some crucial test of society's approval. A week later, Edmund requested a private meeting with Clara in his study. When she arrived, she found him standing by the window, a small leather box in his hands. "There is something I must tell you," he began, without preamble. "I have taken the liberty of settling the debts your father left behind." Clara stared at him in shock. "You what?" "The outstanding debts that forced you into service, they have been paid in full. I have the receipts here if you wish to review them." He gestured to his desk where papers were neatly arranged. "Your father's name is cleared, Clara. The Viscount Hathaway can be remembered with honour rather than as a cautionary tale about poor financial management." Tears sprang to Clara's eyes. "Edmund, why would you do such a thing?" "Because you should not have to carry that burden. Because your father deserves to be remembered for his kindness to his tenants rather than his weakness with investment schemes. And because I love you, Clara, and I want you to come to me freely, without the shadow of obligation or desperation." He crossed to her, taking her hands in his. "Which brings me to the second matter I wish to discuss. Your aunt, Mrs. Pembroke, arrived from Bath this morning. She is currently taking refreshment in the green drawing room, and she has expressed a desire to meet me formally." "You invited my aunt?" "I did, because what I am about to ask you requires the blessing and approval of your family, such as it is. And because I want to do this properly, Clara, I want to give you everything that circumstances denied you before." Edmund released her hands, and to her astonishment, knelt before her on the study floor. "Clara Hathaway, you have brought light back into my life when I thought I would live in darkness forever. You have shown me that duty and happiness need not be opposing forces, that honour can be found in choosing with the heart as well as the head. You have been my friend, my adviser, my comfort, and my joy. Would you do me the very great honour of becoming my wife?" He opened the leather box to reveal a ring of extraordinary beauty, a large emerald surrounded by diamonds that caught the afternoon light and threw green fire across the study walls. "This was my grandmother's ring," Edmund explained. "My mother wore it after my grandmother died, and she left instructions that it should go to the woman I truly loved, not merely the woman I married out of duty. It should have been yours from the beginning, Clara. Please say it will be." Clara sank to her knees before him, taking his face in her hands. Yes, Edmund, I will marry you. Not for the ring or the title or the security, but because I love you with all my heart, because you see me as I truly am and value what you find, because I cannot imagine spending my life with anyone else." They remained kneeling together on the study floor, foreheads touching, while outside the spring sun illuminated the grounds that would soon be Clara's to walk, as mistress rather than companion. When they finally rose and Edmund slipped the ring onto her finger, he said, "Shall we go speak with your aunt? I believe she will want to satisfy herself that my intentions are honourable." Mrs. Lavinia Pembroke proved to be a practical woman of middle years, who looked at Edmund with shrewd assessment before declaring, "You are older than I expected, but you seem sensible enough. My niece is too intelligent to be satisfied with a fool, so I suppose you will do. When is the wedding?" "Spring seems appropriate," Edmund replied, amused by her directness. "Late April, perhaps, when the gardens are in full bloom." "Good. That gives me time to arrange a proper trousseau. Clara may have fallen on hard times, but she is still a viscount's daughter and will be married as befits her station." The wedding took place on a bright morning in late April of 1806, in the small chapel on the Silverton estate. It was an intimate affair rather than the grand society event Edmund's first wedding had been, attended by close friends and the tenants who had come to respect Clara during her months of overseeing the Dowager's charitable works. Clara wore a gown of ivory silk embroidered with seed pearls, her honey blonde hair dressed with orange blossoms from the Silverton Conservatory. As she walked down the aisle on her aunt's arm, Having no father to give her away, she saw Edmund waiting at the altar and knew that every trial, every hardship, every moment of uncertainty had led her to this perfect moment. Mrs. Henshaw wept openly throughout the ceremony, and when the vicar pronounced them husband and wife, the small congregation erupted in genuine celebration. Even the weather seemed to approve, the spring sun breaking through clouds at precisely the moment Edmund kissed his bride. The wedding breakfast was held in the main hall of Silverton Manor, with servants and tenants mingling freely with the aristocratic guests in a display of egalitarian celebration that would have scandalized many but perfectly represented the couple's values. To the Duke and Duchess of Silverton, Lord Hartwell toasted. May their marriage be blessed with joy, prosperity, and the wisdom to appreciate what they have found in each other. As spring turned to summer, Clara settled into her role as Duchess with the same grace she had brought to every other position she had occupied. She expanded the charitable programs Adelaide had begun, establishing a lending library in the village and a program to train young women in marketable skills beyond simple service. Edmund proved to be a true partner in every sense, consulting her on estate decisions and supporting her initiatives even when they challenged conventional thinking. They governed Silverton together, her compassion tempering his practicality, his resources enabling her vision. By autumn of 1807, a year and a half after their wedding, Clara walked through the gardens that had been Adelaide's pride, her hand resting on the gentle swell of her abdomen where their first child grew. The roses were past their peak now, turning from scarlet and gold to rust and brown. But Clara found beauty in the cycle of growth and rest. She made her way to the small family plot, where Adelaide Fairfax rested beneath a simple but elegant marble stone. Clara had visited often in the months since her marriage, sharing news with the woman who had made it all possible. "Your son is well," she said softly, settling onto the stone bench Edmund had placed there for her comfort. "He smiles more now, laughs easily, and has developed a terrible habit of singing while he reviews the account books. I think you would approve." The autumn breeze stirred the last leaves on the oak trees that sheltered the plot, and Clara imagined she could feel Adelaide's approval in the gentle rustle. "We are expecting a child," Clara continued, her hand moving in unconscious circles over her belly. "In the spring, the physician says." Edmund is terrified and elated in equal measure. He has already begun planning improvements to the nursery, though I have reminded him the baby will not care about the quality of the wallpaper. "Yeah," she smiled, remembering Edmund's earnest explanations about proper lighting and ventilation for an infant's health. "I promise you this, Adelaide. I will raise this child with the values you held dear: compassion over cruelty, substance over show, genuine connection over convenient alliance. And I will tell them about their grandmother, the Dowager Duchess, who had the courage to whisper a plea that changed everything." Clara rose, pressing her hand to the cool marble of Adelaide's headstone. "Thank you, for seeing what was possible when I could not, for trusting me with your son's happiness, for reminding me that love is worth fighting for, even when the odds seem impossible." As she walked back toward the manor, where Edmund would be waiting to share tea and discuss the day's events, Clara reflected on the unlikely journey that had brought her here. She had arrived at Silverton as a fallen woman taking charity, certain her life would be one of quiet service and diminishing hope. Instead, she had found friendship with a dying duchess, love with a man who valued her mind as much as her heart, and a future that exceeded anything she had dared to dream. Sometimes, Clara thought as she saw Edmund step out onto the terrace to greet her, his face lighting with that smile she had come to treasure. Sometimes the most profound transformations begin with a whispered plea from someone who sees possibilities others cannot. Sometimes courage means choosing love over duty, heart over convention, hope over resignation. And sometimes, just sometimes, a companion serving tea becomes a duchess, building a legacy that would honor the woman who had made it all possible with 6 whispered words. "Marry him before she does." Simple words, but they had contained within them a mother's final gift to her son, a plea that had saved him from a terrible fate and led him instead to genuine happiness. As Clara took Edmund's hand and allowed him to guide her inside, where warmth and home awaited, she sent a silent prayer of gratitude to Adelaide Fairfax, whose wisdom had endured beyond death, whose love had transcended the grave, whose legacy would live on in the family Clara and Edmund would build together. In the end, it was not a fairy tale of love at first sight or dramatic rescue. It was something better, a story of patience and observation, of courage to act when action was needed, of choosing authentic connection over convenient arrangement. It was a story worth telling, Clara thought, worth remembering when others faced impossible choices and insurmountable odds.